Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Eldora, a strange princess was born. Her name was Elira, and from the moment she opened her single eye, it was decided that she was cursed. She was no ordinary child. Where most had 2 eyes, Elira had only 1, set in the center of her forehead like some divine mistake. The midwives gasped in horror. Her mother, the queen, died immediately after bringing her into the world. When the king looked upon the infant, he did not see his child. He saw a nightmare given flesh. He staggered backward, pale and trembling, horror carving deep lines into his face. He immediately decreed that no soul in the palace was to speak of the girl's appearance, nor show her to the outside world. Elira was to be hidden, locked away in the shadowed north wing, the most isolated part of the palace, where no laughter ever echoed and the windows faced only the sharp grey cliffs, not the blossoming kingdom beyond. It was announced to the kingdom that a daughter had been born, but no portraits were painted, no feasts were held. "A child has been born," he told the court, "but she is delicate, sickly, unsuited for the public eye." And so Elira grew up as a secret. Not long after, the king remarried. His new queen bore him a second daughter, Seline, a girl with bright eyes, flawless features, and a smile that melted even the coldest hearts. Seline was everything Elira was not: beautiful, beloved, celebrated. The people of Eldora adored her. The king doted on her. The court sang songs of her laughter. She had jewels, affection, and tutors who bowed low and told her she was born to rule. She had a mother's arms and a father's pride. Elira, on the other hand, grew in silence. She had everything a princess should have: tutors, royal maids, fine clothes. But none of it mattered. Her tutors were too frightened to look at her for long. Her maids served her with trembling hands. Deep down, Elira knew they would rather be anywhere else than near her. She was a brilliant girl. She had once overheard a tutor whisper to a maid that she was far smarter than her stepsister. But still, they could not bring themselves to like her. They were always afraid. Elira had mirrors, cruel, gleaming things that reminded her every day of what she was and why she could never be loved. She would stand before them and stare into that solitary eye, and she would weep. Why am I like this? Why couldn't my father love me, even just a little? She hated herself, hated the face that set her apart, hated that her father's love had a condition she could never meet. Seline would visit sometimes, not out of kindness but cruelty. She mocked and bullied her. Elira was older than her, yet she couldn't fight back, not unless she wanted to incur the king's wrath. Her stepmother was no exception. Once, the queen caught Elira walking too close to the central wing and slapped her so hard she saw stars. "Stay hidden!" the woman hissed. When Elira turned 12, she was given her first veil, a heavy, dark thing that covered her face entirely, leaving only a slit for vision. "If you must walk the halls," the queen told her, "then cover that cursed face of yours." At 17, Seline tore the veil from her face. It was the Festival of Lights, a night of blazing lanterns and fire dancers, when the entire kingdom gathered in the great square to celebrate the conquering of darkness. The king had allowed Elira to attend, veiled and seated far from the crowd. She thought that perhaps, for once, she could watch, could listen, could feel a little less like a ghost. The people had gathered, and the celebration was in full swing. Seline danced to roaring cheers. Then, with a cruel smile, she glided over to Elira and yanked the veil away before thousands of people. That night, the kingdom met the princess hidden for so long. Some gasped, some screamed. Mothers covered their children's eyes. And above it all, the king remained seated, unmoving, his face carved from stone. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to mockery. They called her the Cyclops Princess, the king's shame, the demon of the tower. Her father never once defended her. Now, even veiled, people knew what lay beneath. They shied away from her as if she carried plague. When she passed, they flinched and whispered superstitions behind her back. She was blamed when horses fell ill, when crops failed, when the rain came too soon, or not at all. And Elira bore it all in silence. By 19, she had stopped crying. She dismissed every royal servant assigned to her and chose to care for herself. In her loneliness, she turned to the only companions who couldn't flinch. Books. She read scrolls from the royal library, memorized myths, devoured tales of warriors and fallen kingdoms. It was then she discovered her love for the combat arts. She would steal training manuals from the Hall of Valor, the restricted chamber nestled beneath the east wing of the palace, where books on weaponry, battle strategy, and the art of war were stored for the training of royal guards and the kingdom's warriors. Slipping past inattentive royal guards, she would sneak them back into her chamber in the north wing, poring over every diagram, every footwork sketch, every description of stances and strikes. She read relentlessly, absorbing techniques, stances, parries, strikes. Every line etched itself into her memory like sacred scripture. After weeks of reading, she made her boldest move yet. She slipped into the royal armory under the cover of night. The guards barely noticed her hooded form, just a shadow drifting through the halls. There, she stole a sword, modest in size, slightly dulled from disuse, but perfect for her purposes. She carried it beneath her cloak as she snuck back to her chamber. With no servants left to monitor her, and no one who cared enough to ask, it became easy to vanish from the palace each morning and slip into the deep forest that bordered the cliffs behind the north wing. There, surrounded by whispering trees and moss-covered stones, she began her training. At first, she fumbled. Her movements were clumsy, her arms ached from the weight of the blade. But she remembered the diagrams and drills. Each mistake became a lesson. Each bruise, a badge. Soon her muscles strengthened. She practiced every strike she had memorized, every sequence drilled into her mind. She moved until her arms ached, until her breath caught, until her body remembered what her mind had read. Everything was going well, until one day. She was mid-swing, repeating a double-strike turn, when a sudden scream tore through the quiet. She froze, listened. It came again, panicked, sharp, not far off. Sword still in hand, she sprinted towards the sound, leaves crunching beneath her boots, heart pounding like a war drum. The forest thickened, and she weaved through branches and leapt over roots until she reached a shallow ravine where the ground had caved in. There, flailing helplessly in a crude animal trap, a pit lined with sharpened sticks, was a boy. He looked only a few years older than her, his clothes torn and muddy, one leg bleeding from a shallow gash. He was trying to climb out, but the sides of the pit were too slick. "Hey!" he called, relief washing over his face as he saw her. "Please, help!" Elira scanned the area and spotted a thick, coiled vine wrapped around a nearby tree trunk. She tugged it loose, testing its strength, then looped it around a thicker root for leverage. She tossed the other end down into the pit. "Grab on!" she ordered. He obeyed, gripping the vine tight. She braced herself and pulled, muscles burning, feet digging into the earth. Inch by inch he climbed, grunting, and even slipped once. She held on, pulling him up with every of her strength, until he scrambled over the edge, breathless. Before he could speak, Elira turned sharply, snatched up her sword, and bolted. "Wait!" the boy shouted, stumbling to his feet and chasing after her. "Please, wait!" She ignored him, heart hammering in her chest. She reached the clearing where she had been training and snatched up her veil from where it lay, folded on a stone. She hurriedly pulled it over her face. It wasn't much, It didn't hide everything, but it was her only armor, her only shield from a world that hated the sight of her. The boy burst into the clearing moments later. He was a few feet away, eyes wide. "Hey, you didn't even let me thank you." Elira didn't turn. She kept her back to him, head down, fists tight with unease. "I'm Jobel," he said, breath still shallow. "And thank you. Seriously, I would have broken something or worse." She gave a small nod, her body stiff. He hesitated, then added softly, "You don't have to hide from me. I already know who you are." Elira flinched. "I saw your face. When you were pulling me up, I saw it and—" He took a step closer, his voice quiet. "You don't have to hide. Not from me." Her breath hitched. She turned slightly, just enough that he could see her profile beneath the veil. Her gaze remained downcast, as if hiding from judgment. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of," Jobel said. "I don't care what they say. All that matters is that you were kind enough to help me when I needed it." His gaze fell on the sword at her side, and he tilted his head slightly. "Are you a fighter?" "I'm still training," she whispered. He grinned, intrigued. "Isn't that odd for a princess?" He stepped even closer, picked up the sword, and tested its weight with practiced hands. He swung it once, then twice, adjusting his grip. "It's decent," he said. "But the hilt is loose and the balance is off. It pulls a little too much to the left. This sword is not suitable for your build, too." She turned completely and glanced at him, curiosity breaking through her guarded silence. "How do you know that?" "My dad is a sword maker," he said, and swung the blade one more time. "A blacksmith, and a swordsman too. Also, I've been training since I could lift a sword. My dad's teaching me everything he knows. He was a soldier too before he took to forging. It's my dream to join the Royal Army someday." Elira's eye widened slightly. "Really?" Jobel smiled. "I could show you some moves, if you want," he offered, tossing the sword back to her with ease. She caught it and, for the first time in what felt like years, smiled faintly beneath the veil. "Okay." From that day forward, they met in the forest. Jobel with his easy laugh and calloused hands, Elira with her fire and silence. She taught Jobel what she had read from all the books she had stolen, and Jobel showed her how to feel the flow of battle, how to trust her body, not just her mind. They trained together in secret. Day after day they sparred, studied, and laughed. Elira had never had a friend before. She didn't know what it was supposed to feel like. But whatever this was with Jobel, it warmed her in places she thought had long frozen. They became the best of friends, warriors in the making, hidden from a world that had never been kind to either of them. Moonlight filtered through the high-arched windows of the palace, casting long silver streaks across the cold marble floor. Elira's footsteps echoed through the silent corridor as she walked with slow purpose, her hood drawn low, her face veiled as always. The hallways were quiet, mostly. The guards she passed glanced her way, some startled, others with that same nervous flicker she had grown so used to. A few maids on night duty paused in their work, eyes darting toward her before quickly looking away. She ignored them all. She didn't pause. She didn't flinch. She had grown used to being a shadow in her own home. As she walked, her heart beat fast beneath her ribs, not from fear, but from something far deeper, something like grief. Her father had fallen ill. No one had told her directly, of course. They never did. But she had overheard whispers from servants, caught pieces of hushed conversations in echoing hallways. And despite everything, despite years of being cast into the shadows, of being treated like a curse rather than a daughter, she still needed to see him. Just once. Just to know if he was all right. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe he would send her away again. But still, she walked. Some distance before she reached the heavy double doors of the king's chambers, she paused, gathering her breath. The two guards standing at attention by the side of the king's door stiffened. Just as she was about to walk forward, the door of the king's room swung open, and Seline stepped out. Her half-sister's presence hit like a slap. Hair pinned in perfect coils, a silk robe trailing behind her. She halted upon seeing Elira, and a slow, poisonous smile curled across her lips. "Well, well," Seline drawled, folding her arms. "Look who's come crawling out of her cave. What brings the Cyclops princess to the king's chambers? Lost your way, or are the rats in your wing finally too much to bear?" Elira remained calm. "I came to see the king. I heard he's unwell." Seline's grin widened, dripping cruelty. "You think the king wants to see you? Don't fool yourself. You're nothing to him. A freak he's been trying to forget since the day you were born. You don't belong here. You never did." Elira's fingers curled into her robe. She kept her voice steady. "No matter what, he's still my father." "Snap out of your delusion," Seline sneered, stepping closer. "You think he considers you his daughter? You're a mistake. An embarrassment. If you're smart, you'll crawl back to your cursed little wing before I have the guards drag you there." For years, Elira had endured this, her sister's venom, her father's coldness. On any other day, she would have turned back in silence, swallowed the hurt, and disappeared. But not tonight. She raised her head. Her eye gleamed with quiet defiance. "No," Elira said, her voice clear and calm. "Get out of my way, Seline. I'm going to see the king. If he tells me to leave, then I will. But not because you told me to." Seline's smile faltered, replaced by something sharper. "So, the freak thinks she has grown wings now. Maybe because we haven't thrown you out of this palace yet. That's why you think you've got the audacity to speak to me like that." She turned sharply to the guards. "You two, bundle her back to the north wing, now!" The guards looked at one another, clearly unsure. Their eyes flicked from the furious princess to the calm, veiled princess before them. Seline's face contorted with rage. "Did you not hear me? I said, bundle this freak out of here!" But before they could even consider reacting, Elira stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. "You seem to be forgetting something, dear sister," she said, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. "Despite this," she tapped the mask lightly, "I am still the king's firstborn. And since he had never made any royal decree to denounce me as his child, I still remain the rightful heir to the throne. And by tradition, I hold more power and authority than you ever will. I've kept quiet for long, but don't mistake my silence for stupidity." She raised her head slightly, her solitary eye glinting. "Now, move aside. Unless you'd like to see what I can truly do." Seline stepped forward, chest rising with anger. "Go on then, show me." Elira turned to the guards, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "Kindly escort my sweet sister to her chamber. She seems to be confusing herself with someone important." The guards didn't hesitate this time as they stepped forward. "What are you doing? Don't you dare touch me!" Seline shrieked, struggling as the guards grabbed her by the arms. "Unhand me, you fools! Do you not know who I am? I'll have you both flogged! Unhand me! You can't do this! I am the—" "You are the second daughter," Elira cut in, her voice cool. "And you should know your place sometimes." The guards lifted her effortlessly, ignoring her flailing limbs and colorful threats. Seline thrashed, kicked, cursed, but the sound of her protests grew faint as they carried her away. Elira exhaled deeply, a small, almost surprised smile touching her lips. She couldn't believe she did that. She couldn't believe she had it in her. Now, with Seline gone, she stood alone before the doors to the king's chamber, her breath steady, her back straight. She knocked once and entered. Her heart was pounding against her ribs as she quietly replaced her mask with the veil. She had never been here before, not once in all her years in the palace. The room was vast, warm with flickering golden lamplight, yet it felt colder than she imagined. Heavy drapes hung low, and the scent of herbs and sickness clung to the air like something sacred and sorrowful. Her father lay on the grand bed, facing away from the door. His once strong shoulders seemed diminished, blanketed in a heavy robe. His voice reached her before his eyes did. "Seline, dear, what brings you back?" Elira froze in place, the word dear wrapping itself around her heart that didn't know what it meant to be called gently. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then she swallowed and found her voice. Small, hesitant, shaking. It's not Seline. It's me. Elira." The silence that followed was long and deep. Then, slowly, the king turned. His eyes found her, his veiled daughter cloaked in shadows and uncertainty. He said nothing. He only looked at her, not with anger, not even with disdain. Just a long, unreadable gaze that pierced through every wall she'd ever built. Elira had thought she would be strong. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times. But now, under the weight of his gaze, her courage began to slip through her fingers like sand. She stood awkwardly, shoulders stiff, her palms were damp, her breath uneven beneath her veil. Still she stood her ground, forcing her voice not to tremble. "I heard you were sick," she began quietly. I came to see how you were faring." Still he said nothing, his expression unreadable. The silence between them stretched taut, every breath tight with tension. Elira felt her chest tighten and her tongue moved before she could stop it. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said quickly. "And I know you don't want to see me, but I just had to come. I couldn't bear not knowing how you're doing. I needed to know if you were all right. And I know you probably hate the sight of me, and I promise I'll go soon. Sit down," the king interrupted. She blinked. "Huh?" "Sit down," he repeated, more softly now. She stared at him, unsure if she had imagined it, but his eyes had softened. For the first time, there was no coldness in them, just age, and something dangerously close to sorrow. Elira crossed the room swiftly, almost afraid he would change his mind. She took the chair beside his bed and lowered herself into it. A long silence stretched between them again. She sat tense, her hands clutched in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze, couldn't brace herself for the judgment she'd lived under all her life. "Do you know?" the king began quietly. "You took after your mother, Elira." Her breath hitched. He had said her name. Her name. It was like a chord deep within her heart had been plucked, reverberating through her entire being. He had never spoken her name before, never once acknowledged it. She had been named not by him, but by her late mother's handmaid, her nanny, the only warmth she had known in her early years, who died when Elira was only 5. To hear him say her name now was almost too much. No one ever spoke of her mother either. The king had made sure of that. Her mother's portraits had been taken down, her belongings cleared away, and her name swept from the palace like an unwanted stain. Everyone whispered that the king hated her for giving birth to a freak like Elira, but no one ever really knew the truth. Elira's eyes welled, and she blinked quickly, swallowing the lump that had returned. "I see her in you," the king continued quietly, almost to himself. "In the way you carry yourself, in the quiet strength you hold when the world seeks to break you. She was like that too kind for her own good, too loving. Even when everyone else turned their backs at her, she would still reach out. He paused, breathing shallowly, his voice growing hoarser. "I've watched you, you know," he continued. "All these years. I saw how they treated you, how you broke, how you shattered, and how every time you picked yourself back up." Elira sat frozen, hardly breathing. "I failed you." She looked up, eye wide. "I failed you," he said again, louder now, voice hoarser. "As a father, as a man, I should have protected you. I should have held you close, loved you as you were. I should have asked questions, searched for the cause of your condition. I should have stood between you and the world's cruelty, not added to it." Elira's lip trembled. She looked down at her clenched hands. Her fingers were white. Her heart was louder than her thoughts. "I was angry," he went on. "So angry. At the world. But most of all, at myself." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were filled with regret so deep it made Elira ache. "We tried for so long to have a child. Years passed. The court began to murmur. There were whispers, pressure everywhere. In my desperation, I had begged your mother to visit a wizard. She didn't want to at first. She believed we should wait. But later she agreed. She did it for me. Because she loved me." Elira glanced up slowly. "The wizard warned us," the king said, eyes distant. "He said, for a life to be created, a life must be taken when the time comes. I was so desperate, I thought it would be mine, that I would be the one to pay the price." He looked at her now, really looked at her. "But it wasn't mine that was taken. It was hers. She died to bring you into this world." Elira's chest ached. "And then," the king continued, when I saw what had come in place of her, He broke off, pain shadowing his face. "I couldn't handle it. The grief, the guilt. You were a constant reminder of what I had lost. I let that pain turn into anger. And I took it out on you." Elira felt tears press against her eyes. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall. "I removed everything of hers from the palace because I couldn't bear the memory of what I had caused," he said, voice shaking. "Not because I was punishing her, but because I couldn't face myself." He looked at her again, his expression open and raw. "But I see her in you, Elira, in the way you endure, in the way you fight. And tonight, you came to check on me, even after everything I've done." He reached for her hand, hesitated, then gently placed his fingers over hers. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but if you can find even the smallest part of your heart to let me try, I want to do right by you. From now on, I swear it." Elira couldn't hold back anymore. A single tear slipped past her veil. For the first time in her life, she felt her father truly see her. The throne room buzzed with restless anticipation. State councilors lined the marbled floor in their formal robes, their voices hushed but urgent. All eyes flicked to the towering golden doors at the far end. An urgent royal summon had been issued. Attendance was mandatory, yet none knew what the king intended. Then came the herald's voice, clear and commanding, "His Majesty, the King." Silence fell like a shroud. The golden doors opened. The king entered slowly. Each step was slower than before, heavy with the toll of illness. Though his frame had withered, the weight of his presence commanded silence. One by one, those assembled bowed low in reverence as he passed. He ascended the steps to the throne and lowered himself with regal precision. His gaze swept over them. Advisors, ministers, generals, every member of the state council was present. His voice, though worn by age and illness, rang clearly through the chamber. "I thank you all," he began, "for your continued efforts in keeping this kingdom steady during my absence. Your service has not gone unnoticed." Polite nods followed as they still listened expectantly. His voice grew heavier. "But I grow weaker by the day. My bones are weary, and the kingdom can no longer wait. It is time. Time I present to you my successor." Murmurs fluttered like moths in the hall. All eyes turned once more to the golden doors, which creaked open. 2 royal guards flanked a solitary figure in royal finery. Her stride was regal, steady, deliberate. A silver veil covered her face, but the richness of her robe, the unmistakable air of lineage about her, there was no mistaking who she was. Gasps rippled through the room. "Is that her? The cursed one? It can't be. She's not supposed to be here." Elira moved forward with quiet dignity, her steps unhurried. She stopped before the throne and bowed low in respect. Just then the queen burst into the hall, Seline close behind, faces tight with outrage. News had reached them too quickly. They had come to halt this madness. The king did not look their way. He rose to his feet. "Today," he declared, "I bring before you the one we have long ignored, feared, my blood, my firstborn." The murmurs erupted into stunned disbelief. The queen's hands clenched at her sides. Seline's lips parted in protest. "She is Elira, daughter of Queen Ashera, my heir." Chaos erupted. "No!" the queen cried, stepping forward. "You're unwell, my king. You don't know what you're saying." The king turned to her slowly, a weary smile on his lips. "My love, I am sick, but not insane. I know exactly what I'm doing." "But father!" Seline's voice cracked as she stepped forward, eyes wide. "This is preposterous. You can't just—" "Your Majesty!" Lord Makore interjected smoothly. He stepped forward, bowing gracefully. "My king, perhaps what the princess means is a decision of this magnitude might require thought, great consideration. To the people she's a He faltered, catching himself before he says the word, freak. "The people may not accept her," he said instead, casting a pointed glance toward Elira. "You've heard the rumors? The names they call her. Making her heir could provoke unrest." A wave of agreement passed through the court. The king leaned forward. His gaze didn't waver. He had expected Makore's resistance, expected the smooth poison beneath his polished words. For years, he had watched as councilors echoed Makore's voice before his, bowed to his invisible authority, let their votes be guided by the flick of his brow, a shadow behind every law. He had tolerated it. Until now. "Chief Councillor," the king said, his tone sharp as steel, "the people should not resist tradition. Elira is my firstborn, by law, by blood. She is my heir. What then is there to reconsider?" Makore hesitated, but said nothing more. "All I ask is that you work with her, guide her. In time, she will prove herself, and the people will come around." Another voice rose immediately. "Your Majesty!" the Minister of Taxation began. "I have spoken." The king snapped, silencing him with a look. "Let it be known that I have chosen not from whim or sentiment, but from duty and blood. Elira will lead, and those who cannot accept this," his voice dropped, low and thunderous, "should consider whether their loyalty lies with the crown or with their own ambition." The message was clear, a warning veiled in the velvet of royal decree. The room fell still. Lord Makore stepped back, bowing once more, but not before casting a sharp glance in Elira's direction. It was brief, but laden with unspoken threat. The king turned to the Minister of Rights. Make preparations for the ceremony. I shall be presenting her to the people." A beat of silence followed the king's command. No one moved. The tension in the air was thick, almost tangible. Then, slowly, the Minister of Rites stepped forward. His robes rustled with the motion, but he bowed low. "As you command, Your Majesty. Preparations shall begin at once." The king nodded once, firmly. "Good." Elira remained still beside the throne, her face unreadable behind the veil. But inside, her heart thundered. The Queen and Seline stood frozen. Seline's eyes burned with disbelief, her lips parted in silent protest. The Queen's nails dug into her own palms, the knuckles of her clenched fists white. The king rose, slowly, heavily, his eyes locked on Elira. For once he had done what he knew was right, and he knew that the road ahead would not be easy for her, but he knew that Elira would prevail. He walked to where she stood. "Daughter, walk with me," he said tenderly. Elira blinked, the words cutting through the fog in her mind. She stepped forward, offering her arm, and the king took it. Together they turned and began to walk down the length of the hall. Everyone bowed low. They watched in stunned silence as the forgotten daughter led the sick king out of the throne room. Behind them, Seline seethed. The queen whispered something sharp under her breath, and Lord Macore's jaw flexed, eyes narrowed in calculation. Outside the chamber, the air felt cooler. Elira exhaled. She had stepped into the fire. Now she would have to learn how to survive it. The forest was thick with silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the whisper of wind through the trees. The sun filtered through the thick canopy of leaves, dappling the forest floor with scattered light. Birds sang from the treetops, and the air was thick with the scent of moss and memory. Elira waited, pacing lightly across the familiar clearing. She could have gone to Jobel's home, to the comfort of familiar faces, to the smell of fresh bread and sounds of laughter. Jobel's family had accepted her long ago. Freak or not, they had welcomed her with open arms long before the palace even remembered her name. Jobel's father had trained both of them in secret. Swordplay, survival, instinct. She knew she couldn't be seen in the capital. Not now. Not with so many eyes watching every corner. If she had gone to Jobel's house, it might have drawn attention. Even though she ached for their warmth, she knew she had to stay away. She wouldn't endanger them. So she waited here, hood drawn low, silver mask catching flecks of sunlight beneath the shade of a tree. Sitting down on the worn stone they had always used as a bench, she listened for the sound of his steps. She could always tell when it was him. And then came the familiar rhythm of leaves crunching beneath boots. She stood immediately, her heart beat quickening as Jobel emerged from the trees. The moment his eyes found hers, his lips curved into that quiet, familiar smile. Without thinking, she ran to him and flung her arms around him with a force that nearly knocked him back. Jobel let out a soft laugh of surprise and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. "Well, that's a greeting," he murmured into her hair. "What's lit your spirit on fire today?" She pulled back just enough to look into his face, her voice trembling with emotion. "He did it, Jobel. The king. He acknowledged me. As his daughter. As heir." Jobel blinked. What? He stood before the state council, called me his blood, named me his successor. For a moment, Jobel only stared at her. The disbelief on his face slowly gave way to awe, then to joy that burst across his features like dawn over dark hills. "Elira," finally he breathed. And then he hugged her again, lifting her briefly off the ground. She laughed breathlessly. He held her close, so tightly she could hardly breathe. But she didn't mind. It had always been like this between them, like gravity. When he set her down, his hands rose gently to her cheeks, his thumbs brushing just under the edge of her mask. He looked at her the way he always had, like she was whole, like the deformity beneath the mask meant nothing. "Elira," he murmured, eyes alight. That's everything you've deserved, and more." She looked away for a moment, but he gently tilted her gaze back to his. He had looked at her like this countless times, openly, lovingly. For the past 1 year they'd met here, trained here, grown side by side. He had never hidden what he felt. He had told her again and again, "I love you, Elira," with words, with actions, with the kind of stubborn loyalty no palace could buy. And every time she had rejected him. Not because she didn't feel it, too, but because she couldn't believe it. How could he love someone like her, a girl with a face cursed since birth, a girl hidden away by her own blood? All her life, she had been a whisper, a rumor, a shame. She believed that what he felt for her was pity. But Jobel never stopped trying. His eyes softened even now. "You'll be brilliant at the ceremony," he said softly. "I'll be there, in the crowd, watching, rooting for you like always. And maybe, just maybe, the kingdom will finally see what I've seen all along." Elira sighed, her voice small. "I wish you would be beside me that day, not just in the crowd." Jobel grinned. "Don't worry. From there, I'll be cheering the loudest." They laughed, quietly, intimately. Their eyes locked, their smiles lingered. His hand still rested on her face, her fingers curled lightly around his wrist. Neither moved. The air grew quieter. The world around them melted, the chirping birds and wind-blown leaves fading into nothing. Only the two of them remained. And slowly, almost unknowingly, they began to lean in. Her breath mingled with his. His eyes dropped for just a second, to her lips. Then, Elira blinked and pulled away. The moment broke like glass. The air between them cooled instantly. She saw the flash of hurt in Jobel's eyes, but only for a heartbeat. He masked it with a soft smile, like he always did, like he always had. She stepped back, eyes downcast. I will be going soon." He pouted playfully. "But I'm starving. You didn't bring anything edible?" Relief fluttered through her. She laughed softly and nodded to a cloth bundle resting on a nearby stone. "Of course not." They settled beneath their favorite tree, knees brushing, voices low. They talked of everything and nothing. When the sky bled into dusk, they both stood. They said their goodbyes, and as Elira turned and walked away, she didn't look back. But even as she disappeared into the trees, she felt his gaze following her. And just like other times, a small, flickering voice inside her dared to wonder, what if he really does love me? What if I'm worthy of being loved? The Pale Griffin did not look like the kind of place that hosted the kingdom's most dangerous conversations. From the outside, it was just another bar. Inside, however, the atmosphere was different. The laughter and drink flowed in the main hall. The lamplight was low and golden, flickering against the lacquered wood and red silks that draped the walls. Music played gently in the background. The Pale Griffin was an establishment secretly owned by the chief councilor, Lord Makore, but run by an aging Ama Tonde, the silver-haired mistress of the house. She moved through the crowd like smoke. Her painted eyes missed nothing. She knew when to smile, when to vanish, and when to usher certain guests into the private chambers where no ears could reach. In one of the private chambers, 4 of the kingdom's most dangerous minds sat around a polished oak table. The queen gripped her wine cup tightly, her jaw clenched. The lines on her face harder than the wine was sweet. "My husband has lost his mind," she hissed. "He has made a mockery of us. That girl, all these years of silence, and now he brings her out like a royal trump card? Seline's face was pinched in anger, fingers tapping against the armrest. "He's dying," she said flatly. "We could make sure the ceremony never happens." There was a pause. The Queen gave her daughter a slow nod, lips pursed. "She's right. The proclamation was made only in council. If the king were to pass before the ceremony, the rest can be handled. We silence Elira." "Chief Councillor, you have always known how to sway the court. You can ensure they see Seline as the rightful heir." Lord Makore sipped his wine calmly. "Tempting," he said, "but short-sighted." Seline's eyes snapped toward him. "Why?" It was the Minister of Taxation, Lord Wuba, who answered. He leaned forward, voice low. "Because not all of the council bends so easily. High Minister Ijara, head of the judicial order, still stands with the king. He's not a man to be swayed easily. And Lady Tavora, keeper of records and royal decrees, she's already begun drafting the heir's presentation. She's precise, loyal. If either of them smells a shift in the tide, they'll resist." He gave a thin smile. "And there's High Commander Senavi. Her allegiance is to the throne, not your daughter." "High Commander Senavi commands the army," Makore added. "She would tear the court apart before she allowed a coup." Seline looked from face to face, her frustration growing. "So what? We do nothing? Let that cursed girl waltz to the throne while we smile and clap?" Makore's smile was cold. "Of course not." He set down his goblet with precision, the sound echoing softly. "We will not spill the king's blood," he said with eerie calm. "That would stir the wrong kind of wind." He folded his hands before him, each movement deliberate. "But Elira, she is no queen yet, and many things can happen before a crown graces her head." The Queen narrowed her eyes. "And what do you propose?" Makore rose slowly, his tall frame casting shadows across the candlelit table. He walked to the window, gazing out into the fogged glass as if peering into a future only he could see. "I will take care of it," he said at last. Seline stood. "But what do you mean? How?" Makore turned. Slowly, his gaze sliced through her like a blade beneath the ribs. Cold, unblinking, final. "I said, leave it to me." Silence fell. The temperature seemed to drop. Even Seline, bold as she was, fell quiet. The Queen said nothing more too. Amatonde appeared at the door a moment later, as if summoned by intuition. She smiled her painted smile. "More wine, or are we ending the night here?" Makore gave a tight nod. "We're done." The others stood slowly, cloaked in shadows and draped in purpose. As they departed the pale griffin one by one, the city around them slept on, unaware that treason had just taken root in the heart of the realm. The great square shimmered with celebration. The banners of the kingdom hung from towering poles, dancing in the breeze. Horns blared, and drums beat in a slow, regal rhythm. At the center of the square, the scepter of authority rested on a wooden pedestal. On a raised ceremonial dais were the royal family. The Queen sat stonily to the king's left, lips tight, her painted smile never reaching her eyes. Seline, dressed in fine attire, sat beside her mother. A forced, gracious expression adorned her face, but her hands were clenched into fists. Elira sat beside her father, the king, veiled and dressed to perfection. But beneath the silks, her fingers trembled. Her heart beat like a war drum, loud and defiant. She dared a glance at the king. His eyes, hollowed by illness but burning with pride, met hers. He gave her a soft, imperceptible nod. That, more than anything, steadied her. From the raised ceremonial dais, she could see the sea of faces. By the left and right side seated the state councillors and nobles. Amongst them, Chief Councillor Lord Marcore sat, gaze fixed and unreadable. Minister of Taxation Lord Woober kept stealing glances toward a rooftop, where an assassin with a bow and poisoned iron-tipped arrow stayed out of sight. Lord Marcore had ordered for a clean job. At the outer rings of the square, the people of Eldora stood, packed against guard lines. Just like he promised, Jobel was amongst the crowd in the first row who had a clear view of the ceremony. He had smiled wide when the king placed the crown on Elira's head. His heart swelled with pride when the royal decree proclaiming Elira the crown princess was read out loud to the people. The gasps and whispers of the people couldn't dull his spirit. Even when some started shouting in protest, he just laughed happily. The shouts of protest by this set of people increased when Elira rose for the final procession to go pick up the scepter of authority. As she descended, she stepped forward onto the long, carpeted path that led to the pedestal. On either side, maids of the court stood in perfect rows, hands folded, eyes lowered. Elira walked with measured grace. But inside her, a storm of emotion brewed. This was the moment everything would change. Every step towards the scepter was both heavy and light. Tradition stated she must walk alone, her steps symbolizing the solitary burden of rule. High on the rooftop, the assassin's fingers flexed over the bowstring. Then he pulled out the arrow and nocked it. His eyes tracked Elira, waiting for her to step into position. He would get a clean shot when Elira reached the pedestal to lift the scepter, and that's when he would take his shot. Below, Elira passed one maid, then another, and another. Unbeknownst to her, one of the maids was also out to kill her too. In the crowd, Jobel watched Elira, heart racing. Her every movement was sacred to him. As Elira walked past the maid with the hidden dagger and got to the pedestal, she reached out to grab the scepter, and the maid moved immediately, readying to strike. Jobel's breath caught, his eyes widening in fear, when the gleam of a blade hidden beneath the maid's robe caught his eyes, and he realized that she was about to strike Elira. His instincts screamed. In one movement he surged forward, but the guards blocked him, shoving him back roughly. "Elira!" he shouted desperately, voice raw. "Elira behind you!" Elira paused, turning at the sound of his voice, just in time to see the maid pull a dagger from beneath her robes. The guards sprang into action, rushing towards them, their swords drawn to defend their princess. Above, the assassin had released the arrow. It split the air, heading straight for Elira. Time seemed to slow. Elira's eyes widened as the maid lunged, blade gleaming, eyes full of murderous intent. Instinct screamed. She moved swiftly, twisting aside just in time to avoid the slash, and with a burst of strength, tackled the maid to the ground. They crashed onto the floor with a thud, just as the arrow whistled through the air and struck the wrong target, one of the maids who was fleeing from the scene. She collapsed, lifeless before she hit the ground. Screams erupted. Panic spread like fire through the crowd. The assassin vanished over the edge of the rooftop. Guards swarmed the platform. The maid fought like a wildcat, but she was quickly restrained and dragged off. Elira rose to her feet, panting, scraped with dirt. She locked eyes with Jobel through the throng. His face was ashen, her chest heaved. "We must get you out of here, Your Highness," one of the guards urged her. She looked around, at the guards, the dead maid, the shocked crowd, and lastly at the scepter, still unclaimed. Her hand reached out and she took it, sealing her position as the crown princess. As the guards encircled her and began to escort her away to safety, the king looked relieved. The queen looked as if she might faint, clutching the arm of her chair. Seline had stood up during the attack. Now she sank slowly back into her seat, face marred with disbelief and disappointment. Lord Marcore's expression was dark. His fingers drummed against his armrest. Something had gone wrong. Someone had messed with his plan, and he needed to find who the person was. Minister Wuba looked ready to vomit. The royal court was draped in tension. Morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, painting fractured hues across the polished marble floor. The full state council had assembled. Faces stern, expressions masked in the guise of solemn concern. Then the great doors boomed open. High Commander Senavi entered with a presence that split the air. Her cloak trailed behind her like a blade drawn from its sheath. Her armor gleamed even in stillness, and her eyes, dark, fierce, held no softness, only fire, only command. No one spoke. No one dared. "I'll get straight to the point," she said. Her voice was hard enough to crack stone. "Yesterday, during one of the most sacred rites in our kingdom, under the eyes of the people and the gods, there was an attempt on the life of the crown princess." A murmur moved through the chamber like a breath before a storm, but none interrupted. Senavi stepped forward, eyes sweeping the chamber like a drawn bow. "There will be consequences. I have launched a full investigation. The assassin escaped, but the maid did not. She's in the royal dungeon, where she will remain until we tear the truth from her throat. I swear, by my blade and my oath, the rot behind this treason will be cut out." She paused. Her tone dropped low, but somehow sharper. "And let me say this now. If any thread of this treason leads back to anyone in this chamber, then Mercy will be the first casualty." A charged silence fell. From her seat among the council, Lady Tavora, keeper of records and royal decrees, rose gracefully. "High Commander," she said crisply, "I trust your resolve, as does the crown, but I would recommend one further measure." Senavi turned slightly to acknowledge her. "Double the guard at the dungeon, with only your most trusted officers. We've all seen this play out before, witnesses silenced by poisoned meals or sudden suicides." She shot a pointed look across the chamber. "And from now on, every meal brought to that maid should be tasted by the bearer. No exceptions." Senavi nodded once in agreement. Lady Tavora sat back down, her expression unreadable, but satisfied. Across the hall, Lord Makore, the chief councillor, stood. He said nothing. His expression was carved in polished stone. Unbothered. Polished. Dangerous. Beside him, Lord Wuba, Minister of Taxation, could not match that stillness. He shifted too often. His collar seemed too tight. And though he tried to keep his eyes forward, he couldn't help casting subtle glances toward Lord Makore. Senavi saw it, but said nothing. Her gaze held the two men in its iron teeth for a breath too long. Then she turned to the throne. Still empty. The king recovering from the shock of the attempt. Elira's seat beside him untouched, but now more powerful than ever. "Until His Majesty or Her Highness chooses to speak," she declared, "I will oversee the investigation personally." Her voice dropped an octave, deadly calm. "And I assure you, the maid will speak soon." With that, she turned and strode from the chamber. The great doors slammed shut behind her with a thunderous boom that echoed in the stunned silence. Outside the chamber, Senavi did not pause as she marched down the corridor. Her second-in-command, Captain Rezu, fell into step beside her. "Orders, Commander?" "Double the watch on the prisoner," she said without breaking stride. "Anyone who approaches her cell is to be searched, questioned, and logged by name. I don't care if they're a maid, a priest, or a minister." Halting mid-stride, she looked him dead in the eyes. "If she so much as coughs wrong, I want to know why." The forest was hushed, still soaked in the dew of early morning. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy in dappled patches, setting the ground aglow in golden freckles. Elira stood at their usual meeting spot. A dark robe cloaked her frame, her face hidden behind the mask that had become part of her armor. The hood shadowed her features, but her eyes were searching the trail beyond the trees. Waiting. The sound of hurried footsteps broke the silence. Jobel burst into the clearing, breathless and wild-eyed. "Elira!" His voice cracked with relief, and without hesitation, he rushed forward, arms wide, and wrapped her into an embrace. She let out a surprised laugh as his arms clutched her tightly. "Jobel!" she managed, muffled against his chest. After a while, he pulled back. "Gods, Elira, are you hurt?" His hands went to her shoulders, tilting her gently, as if checking for hidden wounds. "Did it graze you? The arrow? The blade?" Elira smiled fondly. "Jobel, breathe," she said, placing her hand on his chest. "I'm fine, I swear it. You're going to worry yourself bald at this rate." "I don't care," he muttered, eyes scanning her as if to double-check. "You shouldn't even be out here alone, not anymore. Not with all this. What were you thinking? What if someone followed you? Elira! Gods!" His voice trembled, fierce with emotion. I can't lose you, Elira! You don't know what that would do to me. I can't." She wasn't listening anymore. As he rambled, she looked at him, so much emotion, so much care bursting out of him all at once, and in that moment something gave way. The fear, the shame, the voices that told her she was not worth being loved. She was done running, done letting her fears stop her from following her heart. As Jobel rambled on, she reached up, rising on her toes, and before he could say another word, she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, deliberate, tender. Her way of silencing his panic and answering the question he never dared to ask aloud. Jobel froze for a second, rigid, shocked, but then he melted into the kiss, his hands lifted to cradle her face, and he kissed her back. Fully, deeply, as if trying to pour years of silent love into that one moment. They broke apart slowly, breaths mingling, the space between them charged and fragile. Wow, he said breathlessly, while he looked dazed, like a man waking from a dream, but smiling wider than she had ever seen. Elira's cheeks flushed beneath her mask, laughed softly and said, "I'm sorry it took me a year, and a near-death experience, to let myself love you the way you've always wanted, to finally give us a chance." Jobel laughed too, unable to stop smiling. "You don't need to apologize for that," he said, voice thick with affection. "I knew you would get here. You just needed time." He reached up, gently brushing his fingers along the side of her mask, but as he moved to remove it, she stopped him, her fingers curling around his wrist. "Not yet," she said softly. He didn't look hurt. He smiled instead, soft and patient. "One step at a time," he murmured. For as long as Jobel had known Elira, she had hidden her face from the world. Her insecurity stemmed from old wounds that she believed made her undesirable. Jobel had told her many times before that he didn't care what was behind the mask. He told her that her worth was never in her beauty, and certainly not in anyone's opinion of it. And over the years, he'd done everything he could to show her that she didn't need to cover herself to be worthy of love. He would wait for the day she'd shed her fear and see herself the way he saw her, wholly beautiful. They sat beneath the tree, side by side, the world soft around them. Her head leaned lightly against his shoulder. It was a truly lovely moment until Jobel's voice broke through again, gentle, but edged with curiosity. "I hate to break this moment, but has the maid confessed yet?" Elira sighed. "Not a word. She just keeps repeating she was acting alone." Jobel frowned. "You think she's protecting someone?" "I know she is," Elira said. He turned to her, brows raised. Elira's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Queen. And if I'm right, then that girl will never speak. She'll die before she names her. Jobel's brows drew together thoughtfully. Then I'll look into her family. See if there's been any unusual activity. Visits from the palace, gifts, anything that could tie her back to the palace, to the queen. Elira looked at him, heart full. She leaned in, kissed his cheek tenderly. Thank you, but be careful. He smiled at her, always. Then his tone shifted slightly, more casual. Also, I meant to tell you, High Commander Senavi summoned me. Elira sat up straighter, brows furrowing. What? Why? Relax. He chuckled. I think it's just to question me. I was the first to spot the maid, remember? She didn't look reassured. He reached out, brushing her hand. She won't hurt me, he said gently. My father always said she was just stern but fair. Elira nodded slowly, but the worry in her eyes didn't fade. Jobel leaned closer. Hey, I'll be fine. You've got enough to worry about. Just focus on staying alive and staying you. She smiled at that, their hands brushing together beneath the dark canopy of trees. For once, the world felt quiet, and even with danger circling like wolves, Elira didn't feel alone. Not anymore. Not while Jobel was still beside her.
You've just reached the end of part 1 of the Cyclops Princess. Now I want to hear from you. Be honest. If you were one of the council members, would you support Elira or Seline? What's your favorite moment between Elira and Jobel so far? Should Jobel become Elira's personal guard? Or would that only put him in even more danger? There were 2 assassination attempts on the coronation day. Who do you think sent the rooftop assassin? And what about the maid? Who sent her? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. I'll be reading every single one. And if you're excited for part 2, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops.